They said it was just a roof, four walls, and the gentle hum of washing machines. But for Mason Reed, heir to the Reed financial empire, the gleaming restaurant in Manhattan where he now sat represented everything he'd become: polished, expensive, and utterly disconnected. The crisp white tablecloth beneath his fingers might as well have been miles from the rough cotton sheets his younger self once knew. Success had a way of rewriting memories, of erasing dirt under fingernails and replacing it with manicured perfection. The celebration dinner for his latest acquisition buzzed around him. Associates laughed too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. Champagne flutes clinked in false camaraderie, and Mason sat at the center of it all, emperor of a kingdom built on numbers and handshakes. The lobster bisque arrived lukewarm. Something so insignificant shouldn't have mattered to someone who closed $100 million deals before breakfast. Yet Mason felt irritation rise like bile in his throat. "Excuse me." Mason's voice cut through the ambient jazz, sharp enough to silence nearby tables. "Is this soup meant to be cold?" The waiter hurried over, a young man with kind eyes and graceful movements despite his obvious exhaustion. "I'm so sorry, sir. I'll bring you a fresh bowl immediately." Perhaps it was the waiter's composed dignity, or perhaps it was the cruel laughter from Mason's colleagues that made him push further. One would think a restaurant of this caliber could manage basic temperature control. The waiter paused, studying Mason's face with an unexpected intensity. "You look familiar," he said quietly. Then, reaching into his pocket, he withdrew a worn photograph and placed it on the table. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." Mason's fingers trembled as he lifted the small, creased image. Two barefoot children stood laughing outside a laundromat, summer sun casting long shadows behind them. The sign above their heads read Reed's Laundry. Mason's breath caught in his throat. The world around him, the restaurant, his associates, the empire he'd built, suddenly felt paper thin, a facade ready to tear at the slightest touch. Noah. The name emerged as barely a whisper, a ghost from a past Mason had carefully buried beneath designer suits and boardroom victories. Noah Parker nodded once. "You promised you wouldn't forget." Without another word, he turned and walked away, dignity intact despite the stares following him. Mason sat frozen, champagne untouched, success suddenly tasting like ash in his mouth. In that moment, he wasn't Mason Reed, financial prodigy and Manhattan elite. He was just a boy who had broken a promise to another boy who had nothing but that promise to hold on to. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to follow Heart Stories for more voices that remind us how easily we forget where we came from and how powerful it can be when someone refuses to let us. Summer 2010. Reed's Laundry stood at the corner of Oak and Pine in a Massachusetts town too small to matter to anyone who didn't live there. The heavy scent of detergent and fabric softener hung perpetually in the air, mixing with the sweet summer breeze that drifted through propped open doors. For Mason Reed, the laundromat represented his family's modest beginnings before his father's ambition propelled them into wealthier circles. For Noah Parker, it represented survival. His mother folded sheets and pressed shirts 6 days a week, her fingers red and raw from hot water and harsh chemicals. Two boys, separated by circumstance but united by curiosity, found friendship in the back storage room among boxes of unclaimed clothes and spare parts for washing machines. Mason, quiet and bookish, fascinated by numbers even then, would help Noah build elaborate fortresses from empty detergent boxes. Noah, creative and resilient, taught Mason how to fix the coin slots when they jammed. They shared popsicles that melted too quickly in the summer heat, making plans bigger than the small town could contain. When I grow up, Mason had declared one particularly golden afternoon. "I'll own buildings all over New York City, and you'll live in one for free." Noah had grinned, gap-toothed and believing. "Promise, I promise, we'll make everything fair." The photograph had captured that day, two children without any concept of the different paths society had already chosen for them. The laundromat sign glowed in faded red neon behind their sunburned shoulders, immortalizing a friendship that should have lasted forever but barely survived the changing seasons. 3 months later, Richard Reed sold the laundromat to a development company without warning. The employees received their final paychecks on a Friday with no notice, no severance, no consideration for lives upended. Noah's mother, a single parent already struggling with early-stage cancer, found herself unemployed in a town with limited opportunities. By Christmas, they had been evicted from their apartment, forced to move across state lines to live with a distant relative. Mason's family moved to a gated community with a private school that opened doors Mason hadn't known existed. His father's business acumen transferred from small-town laundromats to real estate and eventually finance. Each step up the ladder distanced Mason further from the boy who had made innocent promises on hot summer days. The night after Noah reappeared in his life, Mason stood at his penthouse window overlooking the glittering Manhattan skyline. Sleep refused to come, his mind replaying the moment when past and present collided in a restaurant he'd never be able to visit again. His phone buzzed incessantly. Jeremy, his business partner, demanding to know why Mason had abruptly left the celebration dinner. The acquisition they'd been working on for months suddenly seemed meaningless. Mason's fingers traced the outline of the photograph Noah had left behind. He couldn't remember the last time he'd allowed himself to think about the laundromat, about the people whose livelihoods had disappeared with his fucking. His father had called it business, a necessary step toward greater prosperity. Mason had accepted that explanation without question, allowing himself to believe that success justified everything that came before it. Now, with Noah's quiet dignity haunting him, Mason began to question every decision that had led him here, to this beautiful, empty penthouse where nothing felt real anymore. The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and fading hope. Mason had discovered through discreet inquiries that Noah's mother was undergoing treatment at Mount Sinai. He hadn't planned to come, had told himself that writing a check to cover her medical expenses would be enough. Yet here he stood, watching through a partially open door as Noah sat beside a frail woman, reading softly from a dog-eared paperback. The tenderness in Noah's voice as he read, the gentle way he adjusted his mother's blanket, struck Mason with unexpected force. This was what love looked like. Not the strategic alliances he formed in boardrooms or the fleeting connections that warmed his bed, but never his heart. Mason had forgotten what it meant to care about someone more than himself. "Are you lost?" Noah's voice, colder than it had been at the restaurant, startled Mason from his thoughts. "I wanted to see if I could help," Mason replied, aware of how inadequate the words sounded. Noah's laugh held no humor. "Now you want to help 15 years later." He stepped into the hallway, closing his mother's door behind him. "What do you really want, Mason?" "To ease your conscience, to feel like a good person again." The questions hit with precision, targeting the very doubts Mason had been battling since their encounter. "I don't know," he admitted, the truth unfamiliar on his tongue after years of calculated responses. "Well, I don't need your charity." Noah's voice remained steady, his dignity intact despite the exhaustion evident in the shadows beneath his eyes. "My mother and I have survived this long without you remembering we exist." Mason flinched at the justified accusation. "I'm sorry about the restaurant, about everything. Sorry doesn't pay medical bills or keep a roof over the heads of kids who've been thrown out by parents who can't accept them." Noah's words revealed more than he perhaps intended. Not just his struggles, but those he evidently helped despite his own precarious circumstances. Later, sitting in his car outside the hospital, Mason researched Noah Parker's life since their childhood separation. The results painted a picture that made Mason's chest ache with shame. While working multiple jobs to support himself and his mother, Noah volunteered at an LGBTQ+ youth center in Brooklyn. Despite barely making rent each month, he regularly hosted young people who had nowhere else to go, kids rejected by families for the simple crime of being themselves. Mason drove to Brooklyn that night, parking across from the weathered building where Noah lived. The neighborhood bore no resemblance to Mason's polished Manhattan existence. Here, reality couldn't be hidden behind designer facades or expense accounts. Life happened in full view. Struggles, joys, community forming from necessity rather than convenience. As dawn broke over the Brooklyn skyline, Mason made a decision. He wouldn't offer Noah charity, That had been accurately rejected. Instead, he would offer partnership, a chance to build something together that might begin to address the failures of the past while creating possibilities for the future. The shape of it remained unclear, but for the first time in years, Mason felt something genuine stirring within him, purpose unconnected to profit margins or personal gain. The building at 247 Water Street in Brooklyn had seen better days. Its brick facade wore decades of weather and neglect like badges of honor. Windows cloudy with city grime, foundations settling unevenly into Brooklyn soil. Yet Mason saw something beyond its current state: potential, history, a chance for renewal. "You bought a laundromat." Noah's disbelief echoed in the empty space as he followed Mason through the dusty interior. "I thought you were in finance." "I bought the building," Mason corrected, running his hand along a wall where faded outlines of washing machines remained visible. "And yes, I'm in finance, but this isn't about that." Noah circled the space cautiously, as though expecting a trap. 3 weeks had passed since their confrontation at the hospital, during which Mason had quietly arranged to purchase the property, research zoning laws, and develop preliminary plans that now lay rolled up under his arm. "This used to be a laundromat before the owner went bankrupt," Mason explained, unrolling the plans across a rickety table he had brought in for this meeting. "I'm proposing we reopen it, but with a difference." The blueprints revealed a vision Mason had been refining since that night outside Noah's apartment: a ground floor devoted to laundry services at reduced rates for the community, a mezzanine level offering free legal aid and health services specifically for LGBTQ+ individuals, and a second floor converted into temporary housing for displaced LGBTQ+ youth. "Second Chance Laundry," Noah read from the proposed signage design, his finger tracing the rainbow-colored washing machine logo. "Cleaning clothes, warming hearts." "It's just a concept," Mason said, suddenly uncertain. "You're the expert on what's actually needed." Noah studied the plans carefully, skepticism gradually shifting to cautious interest. "Why are you doing this? Really?" Mason considered the practiced answers he might have given in another life, about tax benefits or community investment strategies. Instead, he chose honesty. "Because I broke a promise once. Because I forgot where I came from and who helped me get here. Because you didn't forget, even when it would have been easier." The negotiation that followed wasn't easy. Noah refused any arrangement that positioned him as a recipient of Mason's charity. He demanded equal partnership despite the vast disparity in their financial resources, insisting that his experience and community connections held value Mason's money couldn't buy. Mason, accustomed to controlling his investments, struggled with the concept of true partnership, but recognized its necessity. 6 months later, Second Chance Laundry opened its doors. The renovated space maintained the building's character while updating its functionality. Modern washing machines lined the walls, but comfortable seating areas and community bulletin boards transformed the typically utilitarian space into something more welcoming. Upstairs, the free legal clinic had already begun taking appointments, and the temporary housing spaces awaited their first residents. The transformation wasn't limited to the building. As Mason worked alongside Noah, learning about the LGBTQ+ community's specific challenges, hearing stories from youth who had been rejected by their families, witnessing Noah's unwavering commitment despite personal exhaustion, something shifted within him as well. The walls he'd built around his identity began to crack, allowing him to acknowledge truths he'd spent years denying. "Why didn't you tell me you were gay?" Noah asked one night as they worked late, finalizing details for the grand opening. Mason's hands stilled on the keyboard. "I never told anyone. It wasn't part of the plan my father had for me." Noah's response was gentle but firm. Living someone else's plan isn't living at all. And the simple truth of those words resonated through Mason's carefully constructed existence, challenging every compromise he'd made in pursuit of success as defined by others. Second Chance Laundry wasn't just offering new beginnings to its community members. It was offering Mason a chance to reclaim the person he might have been before ambition and expectation reshaped him into something unrecognizable. The community hall buzzed with anticipation as Noah Parker stood at the podium, acceptance speech trembling in his hands. 9 months after opening Second Chance Laundry, he found himself accepting the Social Impact Business of the Year award, surrounded by community members whose lives had been touched by the establishment that offered so much more than clean clothes. "This isn't just about laundry," Noah began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "It's about dignity, about creating spaces where people can be seen for who they truly are." From his seat in the front row, Mason watched with quiet pride. The journey from that restaurant confrontation to this moment had transformed them both in ways neither could have anticipated. Second Chance now served over 200 community members weekly, provided temporary housing for LGBTQ+ youth in crisis, and had expanded its services to include job training and mental health support. The applause following Noah's speech had barely subsided when a commotion at the back of the hall drew everyone's attention. Richard Reed, Mason's father, stood in the doorway, his imposing presence immediately recognizable despite the years that had etched new lines into his face. "I received an invitation," he announced, approaching the stair with the confidence of someone accustomed to commanding rooms. "Though I suspect not from my son." Noah had indeed sent the invitation, believing reconciliation possible despite Mason's doubts. Now, as father and son faced each other publicly for the first time since Mason had stepped away from the family business to focus on Second Chance, the tension in the room became palpable. "You've built something unexpected here," Richard acknowledged, surveying the room filled with people whose lives contradicted his narrow worldview. "Though I can't say I understand it." "You don't need to understand it," Mason replied, finding strength in the community surrounding him. "You just need to respect that this is who I am, not just a businessman, not just your son, but a gay man who's finally living truthfully." The words, spoken without apology or hesitation, hung between them. Then, in a moment that defied years of emotional distance, Richard extended his hand. "Perhaps it's time I learned." That night, after the celebration continued at Second Chance itself, washing machines temporarily silenced, while music and laughter filled the space, Mason and Noah found a quiet moment on the rooftop. Below them, Brooklyn pulsed with life. Above, stars managed to penetrate the city's glow. "Did you ever think we'd end up here?" Noah asked, shoulder brushing against Mason's in comfortable familiarity. Mason shook his head, overwhelmed by how completely his life had changed. The cold, isolated existence he'd once accepted as the price of success had been replaced by purpose, community, and the beginnings of love neither man had rushed to name, but both felt growing between them. "Thank you for not letting me forget," Mason said softly, taking Noah's hand in his. Noah smiled. "Thank you for remembering who you really are." Well, Second Chance wasn't just a laundromat or community center. It had become a symbol of transformation, proving that even broken promises could lead to beautiful new beginnings when given the opportunity to heal. When was the last time you gave someone or yourself a second chance to become who they were meant to be? If this story touched your heart, subscribe to Heart Stories for more narratives that remind us it's never too late to rewrite our endings and discover our authentic selves along the way.